Hello, this is Angela Anderson. Thanks for joining me for this acrylic painting tutorial. In this video, we're going to be painting a Halloween cat and dog. This is a sponsored video from Strathmore and Princeton Brush. We're going to be using the Select Artist Brush Set with sizes, 5 sizes of round, and the Strathmore 11 by 14 inch stretched canvas. I've started out by painting the background of the canvas with Quinacridone Magenta, very light coat. And now I'm using just regular chalk to do very simple drawing. There should be a traceable for this lesson if you'd like to print it out and trace it onto your canvas. At this point, I would trace it on over the top of the pink background. The colors that we're going to be using are carbon black, burnt sienna, cadmium yellow light, cadmium red light, quinacridone magenta, ultramarine blue, cobalt teal, and titanium white. To begin with, we're going to be using a little bit of the yellow and the red and mixing up some oranges. So I'm using the yellow and cadmium red light first, and then the cadmium red light and the quinacridone magenta second. And then I'm mixing up kind of a purple with the quinacridone magenta and ultramarine blue, and then mixing the ultramarine blue and white. And this will give us varying shades of orange and purple to use in our cat and dog. I'm also going to be mixing up a brown that has some yellow and the burnt sienna and black and white in it. And mixing these up ahead of time will just make it easier and faster for us while we're painting in our background and different elements. I'm using a large flat brush. This is a 3/4 inch flat wash from the Select line, and I'm just going to use it to fill in my background. I mixed up a little bit of the quinacridone magenta and ultramarine blue to create that dark kind of burgundy color there that you're seeing. And I'm using that flat brush to kind of just do some little stick-like or tree-like marks in the background. I'm going to use that ultramarine blue and white mixture that we made and go over our ghost part of the dog. I thought this was really cute. I saw some photos of some little dogs in costumes and I was like, oh, I need to paint that. So I'm just going to use varying shades of blue for the dog ghost costume here, the sheet, and mostly ultramarine blue and white, but I will be adding in a little bit of teal on our shadow side because teal is a little bit more cool and warm colors will kind of come towards you, cool colors receding. So we'll use the shadowy teal on our left side, and then we'll use the warmer ultramarine blue on the right side because we're going to have the moon on that side. And this will just kind of reinforce our light and dark side of our canvas here. So using a little bit of that teal and just mixing it in. And if you have trouble blending, you can add a little bit extra paint to the canvas. Maybe add a little tiny bit of water to the paint to help it flow. And then while it's still wet, pick up your next color and blend in lightly. Once you get your second color in there, you can wipe your brush off a little bit and then use that to kind of help blend the two colors together. But it's okay to have, I kind of created this one so that it was a little bit more painterly, and it's okay to show your brush strokes with this one, I think. I think it'll be just fine. So don't worry about blending it too much. I think it adds to it to kind of have some little streaks of paint and see the chunky brush strokes here and there. So the main thing is to make sure that you're getting some nice dark and light areas so that the fabric looks folded. And next I'm going to use my purple to go around the eyes, and I mixed up a little bit of burnt sienna and magenta with some white to do the tongue of the dog. I will just warn you that this will look worse before it looks better. We are well into the ugly stage at this point, and that's normal for a painting. So just know that as you're painting, sometimes you're going to get to a point where you're just like, I think I'm doing this wrong. And every painting goes through it. You just have to kind of push through and trust the process. You have to lay down different layers of paint in order to kind of get it to look good. All right, so I used kind of varying shades of gray to block in the nose there. And now I'm using some of our light brown that we mixed with some white, adding a little bit of purple to go around the eyes. And just carefully using one of my round brushes there. I think this is number 4 round from the Select set. Getting a little bit more of a bluish color for the dots in the eye, and then getting just a little tiny bit of the white on the very tip of the brush to do a little highlight. And also on the tip of the nose. All right, getting some burnt sienna and a little tiny bit of black there. And I'm going to fill in around the dog mouth with some fur. And just keep it loose. Do a few little squiggly brush strokes around the mouth there. It's not, it doesn't have to be all fully defined. You just want to make sure that there's not a lot of the pink showing there, because it might make his mouth look, too wide. All right. So here I put in the bottom lip and with some purple, and then I did the top lip a little bit. Realized I needed to make the tongue a little bit darker in there because you kind of want it to recede. So I picked up a little bit more of the burnt sienna and magenta and filled in kind of the top half of the tongue and sort of just blended it out a little bit there so that it got a little bit lighter at the bottom. And then I moved that bottom lip up just a little bit, so I had to cover up that bottom area that I had painted. So I just picked up a little bit more of my ultramarine blue and white mixture that I had from before. And you could still see a little bit of that lip, so I got a little bit of white and added that in, because white will always make your paints a little bit more opaque and help them cover better. So that did the trick. And then now I'm just adding a little bit darker purple there to the mouth, a little bit more around the eyes and around the muzzle. Filling in some gaps that were still showing a lot of pink there. Now I'm going to pick up some white and do our little teeth. Just using the small round brush there makes it really easy. Do a couple larger canines and then a bunch of little dotted teeth. And then fill in a few more little brush strokes of hair. I kind of went for a darker line around the outside so it looked like the sheet was open there around the top of the nose and the mouth. Picking up some more ultramarine blue, and I'm going to go a little bit darker along the outside edge there, just so that the sheet kind of comes forward a little bit more. I've switched back to my large flat brush for this. And if you thin down the paint a little bit, you can kind of get a more translucent look. That's what I did there with the blue. Now I'm picking up a little bit more white and just adding some brighter highlights to my white sheet, adding a few little folded areas, and just leaving some of those brush strokes sort of choppy looking. Kind of give it some character. Kind of the top side of the nose and the area that is going to be facing our moon will be the brightest. So that right hand side is getting a little bit lighter coats of paint than the other side is. Adding a little bit over there, but not as thick. And I'm going back in with some blue and kind of blending it back in. All right, Just doing a few little touch-ups around the mouth there and darkening up the opening of the mouth up there again with a little bit darker, and going back in and brightening up those teeth with a little highlight of white on each one. Right now I'm picking up a flat brush and my purple, and I'm going to do my cat in a purple. I will be adding black to it, but I don't want to go in straight with black at first because this will give me some room to add some highlights and shadows and things. If I go in straight with black, then everything's going to look a little bit duller. So the purple gives it a little bit of character. I'm doing just choppy blocking of some of the main areas of color and light here at first. So I'm mostly using that purple that we mixed with the ultramarine blue and the quinacridone magenta, and then also some of the highlighted areas are that mixture of ultramarine blue and white. Okay, getting some darker color here for the chest area. And every now and then I'm leaving a little bit of that pink showing through in the fur too. That's okay. I decided to make his shoulders a little bit more narrow so he looks a little bit more like a kitten than like a large cat. So I went in there and kind of filled in the area on the dog's sheet where it missed. But your traceable will have the correct painting or drawing for this, so you won't have to worry about that. This happens as you paint. And the nice thing about acrylics is you can kind of edit as you go, and sometimes you want to make changes to, your drawing as you go or things, and because you can paint opaquely over your previous layers, it makes it really easy to do that. All right, so I'm using some of that darker purple and a little bit of black, and I'm going to fill in around the eyes there and just shape those out. Do a nice kind of curve at the bottom, a little bit more straight at the top, and angled up in the corners. In the outside corners, I should say. The inner corner kind of comes down towards the nose. He looks a little cross-eyed right now, but that's okay. We'll fix it. I'm going to get some yellow, a little bit of my Cobalt Teal, I think, and mix in some green here for the eyes. It's going to look like a ghost cat for a little while, but that's okay. My husband likes to tease that this is the laser eye section, so one of these days I'm going to have to paint in some laser eyes coming out of the cats. All right, here we go. And getting the black to do the little pupils, and I did kind of slightly opened, so that's slit but rounded a little bit so that it's looking a little bit more awake, a little bit more alert. Right? And then until we put the highlights in, it always kind of looks a little weird, so just going to have to ignore the weirdness and continue on with the painting. Let that dry completely so that we can put our highlights in later. All right, I'm kind of touching up the nose. And again, it's going to look kind of funky at first, so you just have to know that fur especially takes lots of layers before it starts to look good. So at first you're just going to kind of, at least me, I always kind of get to this point and go, what am I doing? But you just keep on going here. I'm using the smaller round brush now. I think this one was the number 2, and makes it really easy to get into these little tight detailed areas and do a little brush strokes for that fur. And the fur on the cat kind of comes up, straight up above the eyes, between the eyes, and then kind of goes around the eyes in almost like a sunburst around the eyes. Up the nose goes straight up, but down around the eyes, the fur kind of comes out and fans out, and then comes down the cheeks and out. All right, adding some little highlights to the eyes there, and I added my little teeth on the cat as well. little bit of the white. Getting some burnt sienna and highlighting or shadowing the top of the eyes. That's really important so that those eyes kind of get set down into the head. If you don't do that, they kind of look like they're floating. Getting some more of that lighter highlight color, and I'm just going to use it kind of on the body of the cat. And we are still going to be adding shadowing, so once we add the shadows, this will all look a little bit better. Right now it looks a little kind of flat, but here I'm coming in with some darker color now, a little bit of black added to my purple, and now the cat's form is going to start to take shape. And I can go around the outside there, especially on that shadow side. I can go a little darker, maybe not so much on the other side. And around the eyes, make sure those are set in, and around the sides of the nose and under the chin and around the mouth. All of this is going to really help create that form in our cat, going along the arms and around the body. Now coming back in with my highlight color and adding some more highlights. Making sure I've got a nice dark area all the way around those eyes too. Getting some more white, adding a little highlight to the teeth. And then I'm going to use a smaller brush. I think this is the 3/0 round here. And I'm mixing up kind of a shadowy color. So this is the, well, not shadowy color, I guess it's the ultramarine blue and a little bit of white. Now, this is something that you should wait to do. I did the whiskers here, but then I realized I hadn't put on his little cape. So save this step for after you do the cape, because I ended up having to kind of touch up these whiskers at the end. So I went a little out of order here. Forgot that I needed to do his little cape. It wasn't a big deal, but you know, you probably could save yourself some grief and not have to paint around your whiskers. And that little brush did a really good job of getting little tiny hairs in our kitty cat. And we'll come back to him and finish him later. I'm going to move on to the pumpkin now. So I'm using my mid-tone orange here, and then to do the middle part, and then the cadmium red light for that outer shadow area, the shadow side of the pumpkin, and then the lighter, more yellowy orange for the highlight side of the pumpkin, the right side. Then grabbing some white and adding that to my yellow to get some highlights just at the top. I'm going about halfway down with this color, not all the way down to the bottom. And not really doing it at all on the shadow side at all. Not a lot of highlight on that side. Right now I'm getting my deeper red and going in between the lobes of the pumpkin to add some shadow. And you can see I'm not going all the way up on the highlight side. And this is also going to help with that illusion of the highlights. And then getting some burnt sienna and mixing that in and going even darker. I want to get that kind of color that's on the ground there. So that was kind of magenta and burnt sienna, I think. And I want to use that color on the bottom of my pumpkin, and that'll help it kind of really feel settled. Right. So I'm just kind of doing like choppy brush strokes and kind of pulling up and letting the brush kind of flick out. This is I've gone back to the flat brush here. The number 10 flat shader. Okay, cleaning my brush up here. And now I'm grabbing some of the black and touching up my cat a little bit and picking up some more yellow and giving the eyes a little bit more of a highlight. A little bit brighter yellow in there just to make them shine a little bit, kind of toward the outer bottom, giving each one kind of a little semicircle, and then adding a little bit more black to those pupils because they weren't fully dark. And just adding a little bit of white to my teeth, and then adding a little shadow with ultramarine blue watered down to make those teeth look like they're set down into the mouth, just at the top. Really helps with the illusion that those teeth are settled down in the face. Isn't that cute? It's a little vampire kitty. Right? And here again, doing the whiskers. Wait, don't do this part yet. Do this after you do the cape. Right? Just doing a few little touch-ups with some of that light ultramarine blue. Tiny little brush strokes. I'm kind of fanning out around the eyes. And I use my fingers a lot to kind of blend out if I have an area where, I got the paint a little too thick. You can use a paper towel for that too if you don't want to touch the paint. And then here I'm using the magenta to kind of just add a little tone of more violet to our kitty. Kind of creates a mid-tone between that purple and the bright highlight color. Right here is the top of our pumpkin. Mixed in some of that brown that we used on the dog and some burnt sienna to paint that in. All right, zooming back out, and we're going to draw in our face of our jack-o'-lantern. This is really fun. He's super cute. Okay, so using my little round brush here. I think this was the 4 round again. Might be the 6, I can't tell. But the main thing with brushes that I recommend is just to use the largest brush that you can fit comfortably into the area that you're painting. So if you get to an area and you feel like you're not able to control where the paint is going, then go to a little bit smaller brush. But using a larger brush is always better because it makes the job go faster. You don't have to reload as often. Right, so I filled in with kind of a mid-tone yellow. It was the cadmium yellow and cadmium red light that was pre-mixed there. And then I'm using the darker red to go around the outside, and then now I'm going with the mid-tone on the left side. So I did the right side areas with the darker shadow, and then the right side areas at the top with the lighter of the darker orange. And then in the middle there, we're doing, in the opening of the jack-o'-lantern, doing brighter yellow. And now I'm coming back in with yellow and white, just yellow and white, so that we're getting a nice bright area there that looks like it's shining through. Okay? And then you can go back in even just with just white if you want it to really shine. Getting some more yellow and adding a little bit more of a glow on the top of the pumpkin area there. I added a little bit too much on that one, you can see on that shadow side. So I'm just going to get some of the cadmium red and go back over it real quick. And maybe to blend out there, I'm going to get some of the mid-tone orange and just kind of lightly go over that shadow. Just smooth things out. This is where you can kind of go in and start touching up and making sure that everything looks the right color. Now, if you want to, you can do this part before you do the jack-o'-lantern face. If you have trouble painting around little small areas like this, you kind of have to control where the brush strokes are going at this point. So it would have probably been a little bit easier to do this finishing on the pumpkin itself before we did the jack-o'-lantern face, just making that clear there. All Right, so I'm going to grab the dark red that we have. And the dark red is made with the Quinacridone Magenta and the Cadmium Red Light. Just wipe that off there because I brought that cape down a little bit too low. So this red, I decided to go ahead and kind of go in with a little bit of white just so that it was opaque. And then we can go back over it later with a brighter red, and it'll give it a little bit more pop. So also going to put a little gem on his neck there. Decided that one was too big, so I kind of readjusted. Made kind of a gray with some white and black to go around it, and then just a loose little red necktie there for our little vampire cape. And this is where I was saying that you should wait to do your whiskers because this part was difficult with the whiskers. All right, so there I just put a second coat of the red, and the red is made with Quinacridone Magenta and the Cadmium Red Light mixture, almost 50-50. If you want to, you can also, if you have like a red that you really like, you could use that here instead. Like a Cadmium Red Medium or something like that would be fine. I was just trying to use as few colors as possible, so I really like using Cadmium Red Light for mixing oranges because it makes a brighter orange than a Cadmium Red Medium would. All right, and I used a little bit of that purple to kind of do a little bit of a collar around that red color too. All right, and now I'm just touching up with a little bit of a light gray here and some black around the nostrils, just darkening up the nostrils, and then using some of that light purple to add the highlights around the nostrils. Getting some ultramarine blue and using it to add some light glazing. Now, glazing is when you thin out your paint so that it's transparent, and you just kind of go over the colors you've already painted, and that way you don't have to repaint an area, but it just changes the tone of the color. You can add shadows and things like that without having to repaint the whole area. So that's what I did there, just kind of adding a little bit of darker shadows there. And decided to, I thought I might make the paws a little bit bigger, but then I decided I didn't like that, so I just brought them back. It was changing the top of the pumpkin too much. I wanted to keep the round lobes of the pumpkin, so I just kept his paws small and kind of behind the pumpkin a little bit. And just doing a few little final touch-ups. Really, honestly, I probably didn't need to do this. I'm just kind of fiddling at this point, adding some pinks and other highlight tones here and there. But, take a step back and look at yours as you go. Every now and then, just kind of take a step back and look at it, adding a few little turquoise tones to that paw on that side, that arm on the shadow side. When you get to this point in the painting, sometimes small changes will make a big difference. So if you kind of just take a step back, go get a drink, step out of the room for a minute, and then come back to it, when you get kind of close to the end of a section of your painting, sometimes it can help to just see it with fresh eyes. So I'm just making little tiny tweaks to this to kind of get it closer to where I want it to be, but it looks pretty good, I think, at this point. And decided to go in with some more white and some more of the ultramarine blue. Oops, didn't realize I was so zoomed in there. And this is where I'm just making kind of critical error edits to the painting and looking at it to see what I want to do to finish it, if there's anything I need to do. So I'm just adding a few more little highlight areas and little shadows around little parts of, like around the eyes, and shadowing around the cat a little bit, because I figured there'd be a little shadow where he was sitting, you know, on the dog's costume there on the sheet. There would be a little shadow from the cat. Adding little highlights along the sides there in the blanket. And again, these are very small edits. You may not have to make these on yours. It depends on where yours is at and if you think that it needs it. All right, and now we're going to be adding just a few little highlights in our grass with that yellow. And then we're going to want to add a moon. So I'm just using a tape because it's got kind of the right size, using a little white charcoal pencil to draw in our moon. And I'm going to use my small round brush. I think this is a 4 round with some white. And I want it kind of a dirty white. I kind of grabbed from that pile that's sort of got other colors in it. And I'm going to add a little bit of a yellow glow to this. But I just want to put a light coat on the moon at first. And then I'm going to paint in our little bats. So I'm just using black for this and drawing them in, outlining them and then filling them in. Really fun. Very easy. And just kind of giving them some different poses so they're not all the same. And doing like 3 different sizes kind of stacked together there. And then using a little bit of the light blue, ultramarine blue mixture to add a little highlights to the wings. All right, let's do a glow around our moon. Oh, first I'm going to put a second coat. And adding a little bit of yellow to it. Then I'm going to use a brush called a Deerfoot Stippler, adding a little bit of white to it and then wiping most of it out. You don't want a lot of paint on there. And I'm doing what's called scumbling, which is just kind of lightly scrubbing all around my moon to give it a little bit of a glow. This should be very light. You should have very little paint on your brush for this to look effective. If you have too much paint, it'll go on kind of gloppy. So you want it to just be really like a little fog of color coming off your brush. And then I'm going back in with some bright white, just adding a little bit of highlight there on my moon. And that's done. All right, then I'm going to go in with a little bit of that yellow on the highlight side of my dog blanket. Get a little bit of yellow and just add another little pop of highlight on my pumpkin with that light yellow color. And just setting the brush down. This is the small flat brush again, the flat shader. Just adding a little highlights here and there. And getting a little bit of that concentrated yellow for a little bit of a pop of yellow on there too. Right. I'm going to get some light pink here. I'm just making a light pink with my white and magenta, adding a little highlight on the collar of our cape on our kitty vampire, and some little highlights in the gem. Okay, we are just about done with this. I'm going to get a little bit of a highlight with my fur color and adding some white, and add a few more little highlight in the fur and around the eyes, and then getting some purple and adding that to kind of the holes of the sheet there around the eyes and the mouth. And then using some of that ultramarine blue mixed with water to add another shadow kind of on the left side of that pumpkin. A little bit of purple. Having that really dark color behind it really will make it pop out. So I'm just making sure that I've got my values, and that's just dark and light. I've got nice dark values along that bottom edge and in my shadowy area there, so that that pumpkin looks really kind of comes out at us. Now I'm going to get some more of that teal and add a little bit more of that teal on my left side of my sheet, and even a little bit here in a minute on the pumpkin itself and on the ground in the straw. Get a little bit of white and using that so that I have a little bit lighter version. And just everywhere that I'm seeing kind of my shadows, adding just a little bit of that turquoisey color. Even on my cat. And here's where it goes on the pumpkin, just slightly at the very bottom where it's the most shadowy. And then a little bit on the grass. And this is really kind of more straw than grass, but you get the idea. And then to end, I'm going to do something that I probably could have done at the very beginning before I painted anything. So if you want to save yourself some hassle here, you can put in some stars in the sky. I wasn't sure I was going to do this until I got it done and decided I wanted it. So I am using a fan brush and some watered down white and just dabbing it on there. And anywhere that it gets that you don't want it, you can either cover with a paper towel, or if you get some on your bats or something, you can wipe it off with a wet paper towel before it dries. So there we have it.